of March 15, 2016. As usual, we're going to start the meeting with a quick stand-up. You can go in the order of the names as listed in the document, the Google document. Also, can somebody possibly volunteer to take notes?
I will try and take notes. Where's the Google Doc? Is it in the meeting invite?
Yes, it's in the issue at the bottom-ish.
Okay, in the chat.
Down at the bottom. Okay, got it. Yep.
Okay, I'll start then. Hey everyone. So not as busy as usual, but managed to get a few things done. I think the most important accomplishment we did, the build group, was split the release Jenkins master from the old Jenkins master. So now we have a shiny new server running at ci-release.node.js.org, where we've tied all the release slaves to, and it has a pretty locked down access for now. The downside is, I guess, that all the links we have in the release notes and similar isn't available for the public or even actually most collaborators. But the rationality for now, at least, was that when we have, or if we have another Jenkins security issue, we at least can have a pretty isolated environment where we can still cut releases and we don't have to necessarily take it offline, just so we can continue working. And that also makes it easier for us to take critical decisions from the other CI point of view, because we're not cutting releases from there. So if we have to re-roll a few test slaves, yeah, well, then that might be worth having it accessible during the security notice. And that was mostly done by Rod and me. We also had a look at implementing the access control layer per job in Jenkins. There's a plugin for that called Project Matrix something GitHub something. But it was actually pretty easy. There's just one checkbox hidden in there per job. And for now, we've only enabled it on libuv, and overridden the global authorization. So libuv users should be able to have full permissions to execute jobs and edit the job even for that particular job, but nothing else. And we actually got help from Santiago from the testing group in being pointed to the right direction, and then mostly me and Rod that made it happen. I also managed to give Michael a bit of help with getting Ccache up and running on AIX. It's been interesting getting acquainted with AIX as a platform. It's a bit different. And finally, I've been working on the backup jobs, and it's been running for the last 2 days. I don't know why it's much slower than I'm used to, but I'm roughly 75% through the first batch, which is the full rsync for both CI release, CI triple dub server, and the backup, the benchmark data server. So that's me.
Okay, I'll go next. This is Alexis. I don't have much to report on build. I did help with a few investigations on VC build tools issues and MS build issues, but Joao did most of that work, so I'll just defer to his stand-up. So next is Joao.
I've been I've worked on the VC build tool issue. It seems to have gone away mysteriously. But if we'll see it again, we'll have to investigate more. Also, I've added a check in the Windows test job, actually the Windows compile job, to make sure that the job fails if there are files committed in Git that are not supported in Windows. That's it for me.
Next is Rod Bragg.
Okay, so Johan's covered most of my stuff. The only other addition to that is some trouble on the OS X slaves we've had. Got some networking issues where it's the Git cloning would just sort of halt at, and I think it was almost exactly 25 megs. And so I put a Git mirror, a bare Git clone on there, and I'm using that as a reference clone when it's cloning. So that's fixed that problem. But as Miles found out yesterday, there's trouble downloading large bundles for this smoke testing. Seems to be the same thing. So possibly some Voxer networking thing. It's consistent across the OS X machines we've got, so I don't know what to do with that. We've really got to just find a way to get off Voxer and get new OS X machines, but we'll talk about that later.
We have another one on the agenda.
Who's next?
It's me. So I've been working slowly away at the test job for V8 tests in Node 3. It's actually running on the X and PPC Linuxes. The last one I tried to enable was ARM, and it seems to fail there for some reason. It doesn't compile, so I still need to get on those and figure out what's going on there. Landed the initial Ansible config for the AIX machines. With Johan's help, got CC cache enabled. Still looking at trying to get the release machine for PowerPC. Currently, the machine we spun up is misbehaving, which is blocking investigation of the actual issue. I'm thinking I might just blow away that machine and re-image a new one, as opposed to trying to figure out what's going on that one. I guess a little bit of discussion about the downloads with related to PPC, which I added an issue later on to discuss, so that's about it. Next is Miles.
Hello, sorry, my microphone is slow at unmuting. I've been doing some more work on Canary in the Goldmine CI and trying to make it more robust. It should now work for everything down to v0.10. The only thing that is not building on 0.10 right now is PowerPC. But I think Michael and I were talking about, I believe there's some patches that need to be applied. So I think I'm going to have to work on a way to get that one machine to not build if it's on v0.10. So if anyone has experience with doing that and ignoring certain machines based on a configuration, I could use some help with that.
I think our regular jobs already have the notion of like an IOJS set or just one of those other release sets, don't they?
Yeah, I implemented that, so you can ping me on IRC if you want.
So I have that, and then I have like a subset of machines that should only run based on selecting which jobs, but then that's not actually doing it. So I think I just don't have it wired up properly. So maybe, Alexis, if you could take a peek inside, we can handle this offline. That may be the best way to do it.
Yes.
Yeah. Because from the community source, Power won't compile for 10 or 12, because we only got all the pieces in for 4.
Yeah, we select different nodes labels based on the version. Well, based on a drop-down that is automatically selected by the version. But yeah, I think I know how to do that.
So I have the drop-down. I just probably don't have it wired up properly. And then I've been getting blocked by just these same OS X problems with the downloads. The SICM job started to freeze partway through Socket.io. And I'm getting failures in other jobs as well that involve getting any sort of like tarball or grabbing any sort of data. So that's unfortunate. That's where I'm at right now.
And next is Rich Trott.
Hi, I'm here today mostly so that if there's any questions or comments or anything I need to do during the testing work group ratification discussion, I can hopefully do that. Other than that, I'm working on spinning up the testing working group and using ci.nodejs.org an awful lot lately.
Great. So we can move to the first item on the agenda, which is ratification of the testing working group charter. Node.js node issue pull request number 5461. So this is the charter, the proposed charter of the testing working group overlaps with that of the build working group. It needs to be ratified both by the CTC and the build working group. The CTC already ratified this at the last meeting, so this is now the final ratification, hopefully. Rich, you want to introduce this request or say anything else?
No, I don't think I certainly don't have any prepared remarks, so
Okay.
but happy to answer any questions or anything.
So the thing that comes to mind, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say that the first thing that comes to mind is like things like CITGM sound like they would be something that is related to testing. And same with the the V8 tests in the node tree that I've been working on. So just I wonder if we should be like moving visibility of that over to the test work group, or maybe I'm misunderstanding what the test work group might be looking at.
So perhaps in an ideal world, all that stuff would live under a testing working group. I think I don't think we're prepared for that right now, and my feeling is that the where we're sort of like release testing type things, sort of it's kind of blurry in the charter whether that falls to the build working group or to the testing working group, and I think that's actually kind of useful because I think it's probably best that it falls to both, and certainly I tend to think that things that involve building and releasing belong over here, even if they're supposedly testing. So that would be, particularly the V8 tests. The canary in the coal mine stuff, the smoke testing, is a more interesting proposition because it kind of depends what it's being used for. Like, do we only really run it at release time, or do we run it periodically? Do we run it every time NPM is updated in the tree? Things like that kind of make for some fuzzy boundaries, I think. And I'm okay with a certain amount of fuzziness.
Well, the fact that the testing is done at release time doesn't mean that it's not about testing, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Right, like I guess it's is it that the test work group is interested in saying, we want to define what the test plan for Node is and all the different pieces. These are what's appropriate for release. This is what's appropriate for sniff, the regression tests. And here's, maybe another set we want to work on nightly. So because if it's all those things, then these things kind of fit into that. If it's, looking at the existing tests and trying to make sure that they're all passing in a good state, that's a smaller subset.
Right, and I guess long term, it would be wonderful to, the existing tests are kind of like one huge bucket of tests where there's really no distinction, or I shouldn't say there's no distinction. There's limited distinction between unit tests versus end-to-end tests versus, pretty much everything's an end-to-end test, and performance tests are lumped in with functional tests and so on and so forth. And I think rather than sort of try to dictate how people who are working on things like Canary and the Goldmine and the VA tests and other things, how they ought to structure their tests, I think the testing working group has kind of taken an approach so far anyway of more just kind of trying to actually do the work and set a good example and assist where possible. Although right now, like I said, we just don't really have anybody with, we don't have enough people or anyone with sufficient expertise to deal with the V8 tests, for example. But over time, it would be great if we, the testing working group could act more as a resource for that sort of thing. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question or not, though.
Well, it sounds like, if the long-term goal is to have the test group cover all that things, then I wonder if, Miles and I shouldn't be showing up at that and saying, this is what we're doing, because it's really fits in with, whatever's going on in the testing, right? So that team knows what we're doing, and, we're, I guess, aware of what's going on there.
So Michael, for what it's worth, I'm already part of the testing work group and have been to the meetings and continue to plan to.
Right, okay.
So I'll be hanging out there anyways, which may simplify things. Yeah. I'd imagine that the testing working group would have a lot of ideas of probably the process of how Sitcom should be used, and then it makes a lot more sense for the build group to be focusing on let's make sure it works and what infrastructure changes do we need to make it more robust and reliable.
Right, and I could see it could be focused on what modules should we be testing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would actually be really awesome to have more input on that. I've been kind of just blindly going through statistics and picking stuff right now, but a more focused approach would be great.
Okay.
Yeah, for what it's worth, the overlap between testing and this group is pretty significant. Alexis, Joao, Miles are all there at the testing working group, and I think that although it's unfortunate to give people an extra meeting to attend, I do think it's important that I don't think the testing group can be effective without working very closely with the build working group.
Yeah, no, makes sense.
Well, certainly there's a dependency for infrastructure access, right? The build working group is still responsible for the infrastructure management. So it's an interesting question about release testing, and I mean, is the charter of the testing working group to define the criteria for sign-off of a release?
That's not in the charter currently, no.
Not in the charter at the moment. Okay. I'm trying to see if this group is ready to cast a vote on this ratification. Consider that once the charter is ratified, the testing working group will have final authority over the things defined in the charter. So the only option then for the build working group to have a final say on some of these things, if there's a conflict, would be to revoke the entire charter. Having said that, does anyone need more time to go and review the text in pull request 5461? Okay. Is anybody?
Sorry, I was just unmuting. The only thing I'm really concerned about is security of Jenkins and access privileges to Jenkins. Is any of that covered in this, or is that just something that we work out in an ongoing basis?
So there's nothing about. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm probably going to say the same thing, that in this chart there's nothing about the testing working group gaining access to Jenkins. It's more about the testing working group working with the build working group for infrastructure support. So the infrastructure is still owned by the build working group.
Yeah, so that sounds to me like that's just an ongoing relationship thing between the two groups, which is appropriate. So we can work those things out as they come up and establish appropriate levels of trust and all that sort of stuff. So that's fine by me.
Yeah, and just adding to that, I'd like to extend the trust to figuring out, access to actual machines. We're going to discuss this a bit later as well, I guess, but for me, it's kind of the same thing, having access to machines and certain jobs in Jenkins. So, and I'm happy to have that, explore that as an ongoing discussion.
Okay. In conclusion, does anybody have any objections to ratifying the charter? Does anybody abstain? Okay, anybody in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I
Okay, congratulations to the test. And great job to Rich. Okay, we can move on. Next item on the agenda is per job ACL, access control list at ci.nodejs.org. Johan, you want to introduce this?
Yeah, so we've already kind of touched it. We now have finer grade control on who gets to do what in Jenkins, and this applies to a per job level, and we can override a global access control, or we can just define it, as inheriting. And I guess like this kind of, we have a group on GitHub and on Jenkins, which we call the Jenkins admins group. We're pretty passive most times, but this would probably be a good time for us to at least enforce it. But I still feel like it falls on the build group to help define who gets access to what job and who gets to create jobs, and this is also, I guess, part of delegating to testing that they are allowed to create new jobs if they want to. So I kind of find it somewhat undefined that who should define this in a sense. And I just wanted to at least have a quick discussion about it before someone does anything. I just did one implementation of the job to verify that it works, and that was delegate to the GitHub libuv group to have access and modifying and running the job for libuv. But that's all that's been done so far. So if anyone has any input in terms of how we should go forward with this, that'd be appreciated.
So in that delegation, that's just about basically modifying the existing job as opposed to creating a new one, right?
Well, we can always give authority of creating new jobs as well.
Okay.
And that is on a global level, though. So we're back at the delegation of trust again, I think. And should that apply to groups, or should one group have a nominee in the Jenkins admin group? I don't know. It's just it's perhaps something we should just feel out, but we need to have some kind of initiative in terms of the first kind of delegation of trust, at least.
And I assume create can be separate from delete, right?
Yep.
Okay.
I think since we split off the release builds, release jobs, so the whole release Jenkins actually, so release slaves are petitioned off. Johan's done a good job at even making access to those machines limited. I think I'm finding myself a lot more relaxed about who gets access to what, and having more people able to access. There's drawbacks in that it's so easy to screw this stuff up, and we might find that we're picking up pieces a lot more often. But on the other hand, there's more people to fix things, and giving more power to people improves the testing situation. So that's ultimately what we want to achieve here. We want to improve Node's robustness through its testability. So yeah, I guess I'm not I've been quite a barrier in the past with regard to access, just because of my paranoia about the release machines. But having them petitioned off actually changes things quite a lot. So I'm a little bit more relaxed about that now.
One thing I'd like to add to that, as being someone who has messed it up before, now that we have the ability to roll back changes, it might be really great, especially if more people are having access, to have some sort of way to monitor for changes, like some sort of daily script or something that just checks to see that jobs weren't changed, and if they were, like, notify the correct people to take a look and audit them.
Yeah, and you could see that would be for a subset of the tests, like only ones that are sort of promoted to the common set we expect people to be running regression or whatever.
Yeah, and if we let more people modify the jobs, we should probably have some sort of onboarding as well to help them not screw up.
Right. Now, I mean, I don't know, should everybody be creating jobs, or it's like, I could see anybody who's in the test work group, there's, maybe a natural fit, but if you're not in one of the regular groups, is it that you should have shown enough interest in that side to be actually creating jobs, or would it be broader than that?
Yeah, I think you need to be showing up in one of these working groups, build or test, because there is a certain level of expertise. There's a certain level of you need to be concerned about resources as well. We don't have unlimited resources. You can't just go and create crazy
Right.
jobs. You have to be concerned about what is happening on those machines. So there is a certain level of expertise we expect. So I don't think creating and all that sort of stuff should be totally open. But having more insight into the configuration of individual jobs is probably a good thing, because it has come up a number of times in the past where people just don't know what the jobs are doing, and giving them ability to at least see that configuration would be helpful, because you can see, well, why is the job behaving this way?
Yeah,
Not many
absolutely.
people would actually be able to understand that because it's Jenkins, but
So is there
Yeah.
a permission that will allow them to see the job scripts without modifying them?
I'm actually not convinced you can do that. I know there's, and I don't think there's a view option. The view option on job is actually just for the job and not the configuring part. It's edit or create or delete. I think that's necessary.
So I guess
Okay.
we know about the build group, and we know about our processes to onboarding people here and a trust. I guess we haven't pinned that down exactly. That's part of this question, but I'm just wondering about the test working group, because participation in the test working group doesn't also assume that you're a collaborator. It just means you're someone that's interested in that area and you're showing up.
Either it does in the build working group, to be fair. But we have restricted Jenkins access to a subset. It's the group called Jenkins admins.
But we have given server access, test server access to broader group. And some of those people aren't collaborators either. So I guess it's part of Johan's question. How do we define that, and how can we expand that while establishing appropriate levels of trust?
Yeah, I mean, I at least want to be able to delegate that trust to the testing group and have them decide, who should earn that trust, and that applies to both Jenkins and the testing pub key we have as part of the security repo. I guess the question is are we there today? What do we need to accomplish to end up there? And I'm with splitting the release stuff up. I'm kind of at least happy to give it a go, and assume that we have that trust in place. But obviously, I'd like your input on that as well.
I don't know if we're ready to write a formal policy of what can be done by whom, or if we should still consider on a case-by-case basis and use common sense.
Unless someone wants to write that policy.
Yes, if somebody wants to propose a policy, that would be welcome. But other than that, we can take it on a case-by-case basis.
Do we have, like, so collaborators, I think we don't have a problem giving access to. So, what would the attributes that we would expect for a non-collaborator to be able to say, yeah, we're okay with giving access to the machines or the...
Well, some of the criteria that I saw as, this was my interpretation of our ability to grant trust, where how long have you been involved in Node, right? And are you involved in the build or testing working group? And also, do you work for a company, and would you lose your job if you did something malicious?
Right, and maybe I'd add, are there people who know you, from either through the company or through some other mechanism to basically vouch for you?
Right. Even so, it's not a black or white criteria, right?
No. So is it worth, I could take a cut at writing something up along those lines if those are what we think are the key, if we met those tests, would we say, yes, okay, we're okay giving people access?
I think some guidelines would be useful, definitely.
Okay. I'll write that up.
Straw man starting point would be good, so that we can discuss.
I'll do that, because I think that's also
add a doc to the build repo.
Okay, I'll do it in the build repo. As a PR, right?
Yeah, sure. That sounds fine.
Okay. Yeah, I'll go ahead and do a straw man to start with.
And I mean, I guess as part of that, we're kind of bleeding into a somewhat following topic where we, should we create a benchmarking access group? It's kind of the same problem or solution, depending on how we want to look at it. Because the way we delegate access to machines right now, the way we delegate access to Jenkins, just to make it clear, is through groups on GitHub. So we define groups such as the Jenkins admin group or the collaborator group or any other group, really. And what we do in Jenkins is that we then pass specific access rights to that group, either globally on Jenkins or now per job. The way we grant access to machines is generally through a shared pub key, which you get access to by having access to this secrets repository. And in the secrets repository, we're using GPG to encrypt all files or most files. And those files, depending on what group you are part in as part of a trust, you then get access to. So we currently have a few groups. We have the testing group, we have the infrastructure group, we have the release group, and now we're kind of touching the benchmark group as well, which means that if you have access to the testing subfolder in the secrets repository, you should then have access to all the machines that are part of the testing cluster. So like once you get that trust, it's not very pleasant to have to re-roll it, but at the same time it just simplifies greatly how we access machines. So I guess like the second topic with delegating that trust is, is it the temporary trust, which we briefly touched on, or is it the more permanent trust we're delegating?
Right, because you're saying to revoke it is more difficult, right?
Yeah, exactly. But for a day-to-day, it just simplifies the amount of work we as a build group have to do. And I don't think managing a per host kind of daily access scheme is feasible for us.
Right, having to go and add, so, okay, there's a new person, then we got to go load new keys on all of them, and yeah.
Exactly.
I guess I'd think, is there any case where we would have wanted to revoke it in the past, or, people may have access, but if we trusted them earlier, do we then trust them not to do anything later on?
Yep, there's a couple of individuals that start off on the build working group early on that are not here anymore. That used to be in the Ansible scripts that have been slowly removed. So there's that. I mean, it's not, they're not individuals that we don't trust now. They're just individuals that have moved on and are not part of the activity of the group, and that we wouldn't naturally give access to now if we were to do it from scratch.
Right, but it's sort of is that a problem, and we need to make sure we can remove them, or it's like, okay, yeah, that does happen and will happen over time, but we're actually comfortable that, you know, those people are not going to, now that they're not involved, they're just not going to use that privilege that they do have incorrectly.
No, we haven't had a case like that, but one other thing we have had is changing keys. Like people's SSH keys need to be revoked because of, you know, maybe they've leaked it somehow, or it's been compromised in some other way. So having this shared key thing is helpful for that, although it can be compromised as well. But it's easier to do it with a single key than multiple.
Right, if that one was ever compromised, we'd have to, you know, redo it and then redistribute all of those to all the machines.
Well, in general, it's a good security practice for credentials and access to expire after a certain time, right? To not last indefinitely.
Yeah, that's a good point. If we plan to basically redo the shared key at some interval, it would naturally peel people off, right?
Yeah, and we can even do that in two tiers. We can you know, have the GPG keys we sign these pub keys or these access keys with have a restriction on having that expire as well. It's somewhat tedious, but you know, it at least helps us to get a timer on everyone as well as the group.
Yeah, so basically just mean that, yeah, the one that, yeah. Does that mean that individuals have to regenerate their keys, or is it that we have to regenerate our entry in the secrets database?
Yeah, so if we put a cycle timer on the SSH keys, that would be something the build group would have to both, you know, administrate and update. But it would also be kind of nice to, you know, see people update their GPG keys in the repo to say, hey, I'm still around and I still care.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it might be borderline too much, you know, administration. I have a timer on mine, but you know, I'd regenerate without one now if I could. So, yeah.
So, okay. Anything else on this issue? I put the benchmark security group right after. Is there anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I think
that we want to discuss.
I think that one's the same as we're talking with test, is that we'd like to be able to give more people access, not necessarily everybody in the work group automatically, but you know, some subset.
One question I have: are we comfortable with letting the access correspond to GitHub notification teams? Or do we foresee that the teams could be used as a way for people to stay in the loop and respond to notifications, but there's a subset of that team that would correspond to the access group?
Right, like you mean, but it's, so if you're asking if like everybody who's in the benchmarking work group, I would probably want it to be a smaller subset.
Right, because it's very easy to add people to the team on GitHub, right? Well, an organization owner can do it, a group admin can do it, a team admin can do it. And
so could we, could we just, I don't know GitHub well enough to answer this question myself, unfortunately, but like could we have like, there's a build team, but could there be like a benchmarking team, but like a benchmarking build team?
So we could have an infra-benchmark, infra-testing, infra-build.
Right, okay.
And base the access on those.
Yeah, detaching it from group membership gives the freedom to those groups to define how they handle membership. So if they just want to add people ad hoc without much onboarding and that it's not connected to security for our concerns, then let that be the case. And so detaching it is probably a good thing to give them the flexibility rather than tying them into our processes.
But then it sounded like we could handle that still through GitHub teams just by having separate teams which represent each of the subsets.
Yeah.
And then by virtue of that being in that team, you can access the key, which lets you get at the right machines.
That's disconnected at the moment, though. You need to add your GPT key to the secrets repository to get access to the keys, the pub keys, or the SSH keys, just to clarify. So, like the Jenkins access is pretty easy to manage through GitHub, but access to the keys, we need GPT.
Right.
Okay. Are we ready to move on to the next issue?
Well, I guess we could just touch on the subject. The discussion me and Michael had was pretty much, do we want a specific set of people having access to the benchmark machines? Is that the benchmark group that should have access to it? Because if that's the case, we should roll new SSH keys and perhaps create a new folder in the secrets repository. And add their keys to that. So that's kind of what we had in between us, and if anyone has any input on that, that would be that time.
Right. So I think it should be a subset, and I think based on this sort of when we would give non-commit contributors access, we'll need to apply to that as well.
Okay, so we hold off for a while until perhaps not a policy is in place, but some kind of wording.
Yeah, I think yeah, because I think then we can lean off that same thing for test for benchmarking, and because I think it's going to be the same. It's not you join one of the groups, you get access. It's you join one of the groups and you show up for a certain amount of time and meet whatever criteria we write down, and then you can get access. Along with, I think it should be that you actually need it, right?
Yeah, or if it helps the group's goals to move forward, I think.
Right, that would be with a broad definition of need it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Great. Okay, let's wrap this up and move on to the next issue. ARM additions. This is put on by Rod Bad. The question is if we want the PI3 cluster, and also we need Pi1B plus donations. Rod, do you want to say anything else about it?
Right, so I guess my assumption here is that Raspberry Pi is one of the primary ARM targets for Node, particularly for NodeBOD stuff, for experimenting hobbyists. So having test coverage seems like a logical thing to do, and Pi3 is a completely different platform. It's ARM64. Even though they're running on an ARMv7 kernel at the moment, so they're not actually running in ARM64 mode. They will be eventually, presumably. So it's a completely different platform. Same operating system, though. Do we want to add a cluster of Pi3s to our testing infrastructure and all the overhead that comes with, or do you think we should defer that or make do with what we've got with ARM64? Just wanted some input here. My assumption moving forward is that we probably want to add a cluster, but maybe others have different thoughts here.
I like Raspberry Pi enough, just personally, that I would vote yes.
They are the source of a lot of issues in CI, but it's probably a good thing, right? I mean, not testing them is not a solution to the overhead.
Yeah, I guess the main question is the burden of administration and managing it, and that kind of lies on you, Rod. So if you're happy.
I guess it's also, can we cut down the testing on any of the other Pi ones, because these should be faster, right? At least by some percentage.
Does the Pi 1 need to stay supported?
Right.
Currently, it's our only ARM v6 coverage.
Yeah, maybe it's... I was even going to say then, how about like, do we need to cover like 10, 12, and 4? But it's probably more, they're older ones and they may be running older versions. So.
Right, we don't do 10 and 12 on any ARM because they were never officially supported. So.
Okay. Well, that
yeah.
answers that question.
Well, in general, to me, the answer seems like it would be yes, logically. I also wonder, how do we pick these platforms? How do we prioritize platforms? Right? Do we need more user data to support these decisions?
Yeah, we absolutely do. Unfortunately, the NodeBots working group, or the hardware working group, has pretty much disappeared. So it falls on us to get that information. And I don't think any of us are particularly active in that space, which is unfortunate. So maybe we need to, I don't know, maybe we need to pull in Brian Hughes. Maybe he's the one to, he's active and he's, working more on Node these days with his role at Microsoft. I don't know. I think we do need more help here, basically, but it's on us to figure this stuff out.
So I have some past experience with ARM and working on that stuff, and I may have some time that I could put into it. I can talk about James about putting time in. One thing I am curious about, and this can be tangential, so we can move this to a later conversation, but is it necessary to run the build on the ARM? Was there a reason to decide that as opposed to like doing the build separately and then just testing the binary that was cross-compiled?
That's what we do at the moment.
We are cross-compiled for the Pi, yes.
Okay, then never mind. I retract what I said.
For releases, we are building on those machines, but for testing, we're cross-compiling.
Okay, so that's why the testing is a lot faster than the releasing.
Yes, I think that beyond this conversation, we need to expand a bit our process for selecting platforms and prioritizing them.
Is that going to mean that on the download page there's another box for ARM? Like we have ARM 6, 7, and 8?
No. Pi 3 wouldn't be a build target for releases. So at the moment, the Pi 1s are, but the Pi 2s are not used for those downloads, and the Pi 3s won't be either because we have other machines handling that. So, yeah. And also, as I said before, they're actually technically not running in ARM 64 mode anyway yet.
Right.
So they're not that helpful yet.
Would any of those binaries work on the Pi 3 or?
I don't know. I'm suspecting not because of the way that they're currently working. But I'd love to be able to try. To be able to give advice on whether our ARM64 binaries work on the Pi 3s would be interesting.
Right.
But I don't have one yet, so I don't know.
So I would suggest that we open an issue about supported platforms on GitHub and try to get some community input as well, and see what channels we can use to get that input.
Yeah, I guess it's Yeah. I'm just wondering in terms of input we'd already have, like do we have people asking for certain platforms or working on certain platforms to keep them live? And
yeah, we've got IBM.
Yeah, so yeah, exactly. I know we fall into the category. We're interested in the ones that we're working on. Are there other groups doing that for other platforms? I guess Microsoft on Windows.
Yes, some vendors are trying to support their own platforms, but it's also a question of community support, right? If the community is using Node and certain platforms heavily, we need to make sure it's our duty to make sure that it's tested on that platform.
Yeah, no, for sure. If we want to, like, in the case of the Raspberry Pi, it's kind of like, Node seems like a good fit for IoT. So, but by having Node run there, we're enabling, it as a platform for that whole area. So it's not like, I don't know if it's the ARM case, and that's the interesting part for me, but just the fact that it's often used in that environment.
Yeah, I guess the thing is that ARM is there's such a variety of ARM devices out there that's why ARM is the interesting case here. But we can test ARM, or we can test various devices that are built on ARM.
Right.
And in the past, I think my inclination has been to do this by gut feel on the kinds of issues we get on the main repo, people reporting issues on different platforms. And we've had BeagleBone Black before is one of the ones that's come up a number of times. I think since we've started more rigorously testing and supporting ARM devices, I really haven't seen much BeagleBone or even many ARM issues come up. So I feel like I'm pretty comfortable with our coverage, and I imagine if we start getting issues for new platforms or different platforms that we don't support, that would start to tell us what we need to add to our cluster. That's my way. I think that I'd be comfortable doing it at the moment, since we don't have good insight, and I'm not sure that there's even a better way to get insight. Just seeing who turns up with issues that we don't support yet.
Right, because if you go out with a call to say, hey, what do you want us to support? I can see all sorts of people saying, hey, here's my favorite one. But if that doesn't come with, and we're actively using it and willing to contribute, or we're opening issues because we're actively using it and running into issues, and are going to work with you to resolve them.
Right, or there might be only
A
2
random
people
list.
actually using that platform.
Right, but they could be more vocal than the other people.
Just for the record, since I've been culling through old issues lately and bug reports that seem to stall and whatnot, the one platform that does seem to come up that is not represented in our infrastructure is Android.
Right, that's an interesting case, that one.
It's not even fully supported in the build, right? There was recently a pull request to enable Android support.
I think the approach we've had so far is to say, we don't officially support Android, but you're welcome to contribute to making it work. But that, of course, doesn't say whether we should officially support it or not. So it is coming up a lot. But to me, it seems like one of those things where it's such a... You've really got to have a lot of expertise to be able to even put it onto Android. So I don't know, it feels like a question for the CTC, I guess.
Do include build instructions for Android, I believe, for what that's worth. I mean, meaning that kind of implies that it works on Android.
I think this discussion needs to be continued, and we don't have any definitive answers yet. I can open an issue on GitHub and take the conversation back to GitHub, possibly escalate to the CTC, and try to get some input there.
Yeah, it does seem like something this group should periodically revisit. What platforms is the community actively supporting, and is it the right set?
Okay, I'll open an issue on GitHub. The next item on the agenda is OSX donations and hosting. How do you also put this on the agenda?
The one thing we didn't touch on was the Pi 1B hardware donations. Like, was there something specific you wanted to bring up on that front, Rod? Like, do we need to put a call out, or what's the...
Yeah, I was going to put a call out because we're now down to 6 Pi 1s for testing, because we've taken 2 out of action for releases. So I was going to put a call out. I just wanted to put that on people's radar, that was something that was in the pipeline. Our CI infrastructure is set up to parallelize across 4 machines, which was optimal when we had 8 of them. We have 11 Pi 2s, which is fine, but down to 6 Pi 1s being the slowest is a bit of a concern. So we need more there. So just wanted to get that on people's radar, that we're I'm going to put any call out. I'm going to do it by opening an issue on the build working group and promoting that and saying this is what we need. This is how you can donate.
Yeah, that sounds uncontroversial. I mean, once we support the platform in CI, we want enough machines for it, right?
Yep.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is about OS X permissions and hosting. How do you put this on the agenda?
I guess I can chip in. So OS X has been kind of a concern for a while now. To be frank, it's been working. We've had 4 VMs at Voxer. I think it must have been more than 6 months ago. Voxer told us that they wouldn't actively, endorse and help us any longer. Whatever we had there would still be up and running, but if any problems occurred, they didn't give us any guarantees. And I mean, as of late, we're running into these HTTP or traffic-related issues. It's even more apparent that we need to find a new home for the OS X test VMs. And additionally, one of the most recurring questions I see regarding OS X is which releases do we support? Is it 10.7? Is it 10.8? And we actually don't even test on 10.8 in the Jenkins environment. So I think we should try and take this more seriously and start asking around. I think both Rod and I have been doing a bit of work here, but I think this issue is here to help escalate this. I've been also looking at suitable new homes for OS X, and one of the tricky part with setting this up, be it dedicated hardware or co-location or VMs, is that it's hard to get hold of licenses for older versions of OS X. I've had a chat with a friend at Apple, and he says that if you have a USB drive with an older version, that's great, but we can't provide you with anything older. And one of the interesting choices that popped up was a provider called Mac Stadium. They can provide us with pretty much 10.7 and up in terms of operating system if we want to co-locate with them or if we want to virtualize with them. So that's pretty interesting. But yeah, we are in dire need of directing our attention towards a new OS X partner or host.
You guys are looking for somebody who would donate resources? Is that?
Exactly.
Yeah, there's a few paths here. One is we could look for someone who donates finances, and we can put their name to it, and then we could use those finances to find resources, either with a colo company like Mac Stadium. There's a few of them out there. We could find someone that is willing to host, like Voxer was, and who has good network, and who is reputable. A large company basically. And again, we can put their name to it. And the other one is we could just get someone to, take care of it all and just give us access to something. I guess this is the same as the first option. But yeah.
Isn't there another option?
The other option is the.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say the other option is the foundation.
Right. I was just going to say.
We can easily get money from the foundation for this. I can say that I can go to the foundation and say, this is what we want, this is our budget, and we would get that money. So I would personally like us to exhaust the other options first, because getting other companies, particularly companies, because we're talking about a lot of money here, getting other companies involved is a way of getting them involved in the foundation without making them members specifically. That's a positive thing, but I don't want to see this thing drag out, because it's we're not in a good situation now. So if we have to, we can do the foundation thing.
Right. So I don't think there's an issue on our tracker about this, and we should probably open one and try to exhaust those options. And then if you don't find the resolution, escalate to the foundation.
Yeah, maybe Johan, you can open an issue that outlines what we need, and we can promote that to the parties that we're currently talking to and others, and we can use that to decide whether we move forward with the foundation option.
Sure. And I also think in correlation with this, every now and then I reach out to companies and saying, hey, this is who we are, this is what we do. If you're interested in getting involved, here's a few ways. And we should probably try and find wordings everyone can use as part of the build group to help expand this list of sponsors. So yeah, it'd be great to have a bit more material to communicate if you're in that position.
Is this something that we
could
use the marketing team channels, Node.js blog, to ask for support, to spread the word about this?
Yeah, and I think especially making it very visible what's in it for them. Why should a company be part of the build infrastructure support, and how do they get visible attention as a result? At least that's the most common questions I run into when I'm talking to people.
Sounds good. Let's open the issue, and then we can figure out how to promote it. And probably we'll need to stay on the working group agenda until resolved. So we're past the hour. Let's discuss quickly the download page question by Michael.
Yeah, I thought since I'd have you, Rod, any other concerns over the last suggestion that I'd made?
What was the last suggestion?
So I guess the previous suggestion was moving all the platforms underneath the additional platforms, but it had left the PowerPC ones all as from IBM unsupported. So I simply modified that picture so that there was a PPC little endian and a PPC big endian. The PPC little endian basically looked like the others because the binaries actually come from our download page, and then the big endian ones, basically says provided by IBM, unsupported or unofficial, whatever the wording was, and then the Z-Linux and AIX are still like that as well.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I'm happy. Actually, more happy seeing those two categories separated. Wasn't a huge fan of putting the unsupported ones in with the supported ones.
Well, that's what the final one is that they're under additional platforms. They're all together. It's just that the links for the ones which are unofficial say unofficial, right?
Yep. No, that's fine. As long as it's like a separate category thing, as in when you look at it, it's clear that this is a separate type of thing.
Yeah, you have the first one, which is like Windows, Linux, Mac, and then basically it's ARM, Solaris, and these other ones down in the other category. Okay, so if you're good with that, we'll go ahead on that front.
Great. Is there any other business that anyone wants to discuss? I'll go back to the recording and try to summarize what we missed in minutes. Okay, thank you very much for joining us.
Okay, thanks. Okay, bye.
See you guys.
Bye. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.